Russia has denied allegations that Nigerians are being recruited to fight in Ukraine. Russian Ambassador Andrei Podyalyshev described such reports as unfounded and disconnected from the Russian government. Speaking at the press conference, Podyalyshev said that if some illegal actors are trying to recruit Nigerians to fight in Ukraine, this is not connected with the Russian state, adding that any credible information would be forwarded to the Russian law enforcement authorities for investigation. Last week, the issue of Ukraine was raised in a phone conversation between Russian President Vladimir Putin and his South African counterpart Cyril Ramaphosa. The Kremlin said in its readout that President Ramaphosa expressed support for Russia's efforts aimed at resolving the conflict via political and diplomatic means, while South Africa's readout says that the two presidents, quote, pledged their support for the process of returning South Africans fighting alongside Russian forces in Ukraine. It added that the teams from both sides will continue their engagements towards the finalization of this process. In Kenya, Prime Cabinet Secretary and Minister for Foreign Affairs Musalia Mudavadi said that Nairobi is engaged with Moscow over the same issue. Meanwhile, Moscow has pledged its support to Nigeria and other African nations in their efforts to fight terrorism. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova noted that Moscow's position remains unchanged, pointing out that terrorism is a global issue, while emphasizing Russia's willingness to offer support in cooperation with the international community, the UN organizations, and the African Union. Dasha Cherneshova, CGTN, Moscow.
Right now, for more on this, let's bring in Dr. Oluwole Ojewale, who's a senior researcher at the Institute for Security Studies. He joins us via Zoom from Dakar this hour. Doctor, thank you for joining us. 4 years into the war now, how has the conflict between Russia and Ukraine reshaped global power dynamics, and where does Africa fit into this new order?
Thank you so much for having me. It's obvious how this is reshaping global balance of power. We've seen even the extent to which it has fractured the transatlantic pact that has lasted for many decades, in which European countries are now banded together and then seeing Russia as a major threat. And that has really affected other areas of support that they've provided to the countries in the global south. We've seen them elevating their commitment to defense in terms of a fraction of their GDP, while they are also dropping foreign aid commitments. Where does this leave Africa? Africa suddenly, of course, we've not really been invited into that table, but I think our compatriots and the Africa as a continent is fast becoming a collateral damage in that process, in the sense that most Africans, as a result of the biting economic realities, which you refer to in the intro of this program, are now throwing caution to the wind to go and fight in the Russia war in Ukraine, even with those that don't even have battlefield experience. And we are seeing the backlash in Kenya, in Nigeria, and other parts of Africa. So I think it has reshaped the global balance of power in the real sense of it. But Africa that has not been invited to the table has also become a collateral damage in the process.
And Doctor, we are seeing fresh concerns over reports that African citizens are being recruited through agents to join this conflict. What does this communicate then about the continent in relation to the conflict?
Yes, it communicates powerlessness. It communicates that government had not really provided the necessary support for the youth. It communicates the sheer economic hopelessness in which most citizens have been facing over the years, to the point that they are willing to lay down their life for a conflict where they really do not have any stake. I think it's really a very bad, a very sad reality for the continent, which I believe strongly that should be elevated to the point of a conversation in the African Union now, and then that the governments of countries in Africa must be seen to be addressing the economic concerns, the livelihood support that affect their citizens on the continent.
And Doctor, the war did disrupt the Black Sea grain exports, which did then have a knock-on effect on even African countries. How severe was the impact of on food importing African countries like Egypt, Somalia, and Nigeria?
It's very sad that we found ourselves at that very precarious triangle. In the first place, we're not supposed to be. But it shows the extent to which our food supply chain is dependent on Ukraine in particular. and that food crops that naturally we should be able to produce in Africa, in some part of East Africa, in some part of Sahel. The grains are the ones that we really depend on, and it affected commodity pricing on the continent, which is also a sad reality of where we find ourselves. We have arable lands, but government have not really provided the required enabling environment to be able to produce those food that will be consumed on the continent. If it teaches us any lesson at all, it's the fact that the African government must work towards food sufficiency. We have the arable land, we have the favorable climate. Africa of over 1 billion people is relying on food supply from Ukraine that is even a fraction of maybe some of our middle country in terms of population concentration. So I think this is something that is a wake up to African leaders and realize that unprecedented moments like this can happen that can affect food supply chain, and they must be wary of such dependence.
Right, and finally, Doctor, 4 years on with no signs of an end to the conflict here, what can we maybe expect to be the long-term global consequences?
Well, I think I will speak on behalf of the continent again. The long-term consequences that as long as the Russia war in Ukraine persists, I think conflict in Africa, in Sudan, in DRC, are largely going to be relegated to the background of global attention. That is what we have seen. We have not seen the kind of commitment that we've seen towards the Russia war in Ukraine, the extent to which it has attracted global conversation. The same in the Middle East. I think it's bold for the state of conflict in Africa that is not receiving the required internal attention on the continent, and as well as the global attention. And we are seeing the humanitarian fallout of that on the continent, in Sudan and other conflicts theater on the continent.